Leah's thoughts spiraled in panic. Who was this man? The one she married? Or a killer in disguise? Years before the wedding, Julian stood before Her Majesty in a tense meeting. He wasn't happy about it. The Queen had one goal: get him married. She even presented a portrait of his potential bride, Isabella Riveron, the eldest Riveron daughter and kingdom's most celebrated beauty. Julian wasn't impressed. Rather than object outright, he cleverly asked for a 3-year postponement, claiming he wanted to serve in the war. He promised to do her bidding after that. Privately, Julian was bitter. He believed marriage was nothing but a trap, especially after witnessing the toxic relationship between his parents. His father had been a heartless soldier. His mother, a royal by birth, was emotionally dependent and ignored. Julian had grown up in cold silence, a neglected child between 2 unhappy adults. He vowed never to end up like them. So he used the war as an excuse to buy time, 3 years of freedom. But time passed faster than he expected. Before he knew it, Julian found himself summoned again. The Queen smiled like she held all the cards. This time, she ordered him to visit Riveron Island for 3 months. He was to return with news of his engagement. Julian was furious, but masked it well. He wasn't going to marry anyone just because she told him to. On the journey to Riveron, he sat silently in the carriage, listening to the idle chatter of suitors Antoine and Roseman. It became painfully obvious the Queen had stacked the deck. She wanted him to stand out among the competition. This was all orchestrated for Leah. Julian vented to his friend Edmund upon arrival, annoyed and cynical. At the welcoming ball, Edmund asked if he'd seen Leah yet. Julian scoffed. She looks like she hasn't eaten in days to fit into that dress. Harsh words, but then he admitted, Leah was charming, beautiful even. Not my type, he concluded. When asked what his type was, Julian paused, then replied, someone calculating, cold, smart, but not too smart. Someone who doesn't care about marriage. Someone like me. Edmund raised an eyebrow. That sounds like Leah to me. Julian dismissed it. She's too assertive. Besides, I'm not marrying into Duke Riveron's business of selling off his daughters. Suddenly, Leah stormed over, clearly angry. But then, in a flash, her expression changed. She greeted him politely. Their first meeting had begun with fire. The next morning at tea, Julian and Leah sat in uncomfortable silence. She glared at him. He tried to stay cool. Then she broke the tension. I'll forgive you, she said, referring to his rude remarks at the ball. Julian raised a brow. Did I say something rude? Leah bristled. You know you did. An apology would be nice. Julian didn't budge. Instead, he turned the tables. Do you not agree your father treats marriage like a business? Leah was stunned. She had overheard him insulting her father the night before. Julian doubled down, criticizing the Duke's exploitation of the island's beauty and his daughters alike. Fuming, Leah stood and shouted, There's no way I'd ever marry someone like you. Julian smirked. Glad to hear it. If I'm ever forced to propose, do me a favor and reject me. Their tension was palpable. When Edmund heard what Julian had said to Leah, he was furious. You didn't just avoid marriage. You humiliated her, he scolded. If you hated the idea so much, you should have spoken to Her Majesty. Not ruin an innocent woman's chances. Julian was struck by the truth in Edmund's words. He had been cowardly. The next day, he tried to apologize to Leah, but she ignored him. He noticed her smiling at others, something he had never seen before. When she caught him staring, she snapped, Want to insult me again? Julian shook his head. I just wanted to say sorry, I was wrong, about everything. To his surprise, Leah accepted his apology. He awkwardly called her by name, Leah, only for her to snap again, saying he hadn't earned that right. Still, she let him speak. Julian surprised both of them by asking, Can we be friends, at least? Leah blinked. Friends? He admitted that, despite his behaviour, he liked her. She pushed him away. You insulted me, you judged me. Julian softened. I was wrong. And for the record, you have the most beautiful eyes I've ever seen. Leah didn't respond right away. Then she turned and said, There's nothing to criticize about your appearance either. Julian couldn't help but smile. Maybe, just maybe, he hadn't left such a terrible first impression after all. Leah wasn't about to let things get too soft. Don't get the wrong idea, she added playfully. That good impression you made? It didn't last long. Julian laughed. Fair enough. So, what's the condition? Since Julian had been speaking to her so casually, Leah assumed he now saw her as a friend. Can I talk to you the way I do with my other friends? She asked. Julian smiled. Of course. With that, Leah gave him a light pat on the shoulder. See you tomorrow, Julian. Then she turned and walked away, leaving Julian standing there, completely stunned. No one, not even his closest friend Edmund, had ever spoken to him like that, or touched him so casually. Quickly catching up to her, Julian asked, Did the way I spoke to you make you uncomfortable? Leah paused, then nodded. A little. I just thought, if we're friends now, we should talk to each other more naturally. Fair is fair. Julian nodded, respectful. Then I'll try to be more polite. Promise. Leah beamed. Deal. The next day, Julian found himself standing alone in the lavender field, deep in thought. What did Leah like? Bella had to call his name 3 times before he snapped out of it. Oh, sorry, Bella. Do you know what Leah's into lately? Bella smirked. She's been reading a lot of mystery novels. That was all Julian needed to hear. He thanked her and quickly excused himself, heading off with purpose. He spent the day finding a few mystery books, and even wrote a short letter to go along with the gift. In it, he thanked Leah for forgiving his earlier behaviour, and wrote that the books were a gesture to celebrate their newfound friendship. He couldn't help but wonder how she'd react. Julian arrived early at the tea hall, eager and a little nervous. He found Leah already there, but she didn't look well. Are you all right? He asked, concerned. She groaned softly. I couldn't sleep. That book you gave me. I stayed up all night reading it. Julian's face lit up. You already read it? From there they slipped into easy conversation, dissecting the plot and characters. Leah praised Julian for being such a good listener. Julian, in turn, told her she was a gifted speaker. You tell stories better than the authors themselves, he said, smiling. Leah blushed slightly. I used to write stories too, but my father always said women shouldn't publish books. Her expression darkened. Especially after marriage. No man wants a wife who suddenly decides to become an author. Julian was quiet for a moment. Then he said, Then write a book. I'll publish it under my name. Leah looked at him, stunned. Your future wife might not like that. Julian shrugged, grinning. I don't plan on getting married, so that shouldn't be a problem. Leah laughed at his boldness. Then Julian leaned in slightly, a mischievous glint in his eye. Or we could just get married. That way no one could object. Leah blinked. Was that a proposal? They both burst into laughter at the absurdity of it all. Thank you, Leah said, once they'd calmed down. But you don't love me. Julia waved it off. Love is overrated. Leah raised an eyebrow. Maybe you think that, but for me, love's way more important than just getting a book published. Julian studied her. There was something in the way she said it, something sincere, maybe even wistful. Have you been in love before? He asked. Leah smiled proudly. Only in books. She offered to lend him one of her favourites, a romance novel. You need to understand love before you go throwing around fake proposals. Julian chuckled and agreed. All right, I'll read it. A week passed since that moment, and Julian found himself walking through Riveron alone, lost in thought. He couldn't stop replaying that day when he teared up over a book, and Leah didn't tease him for it. Since then, they'd been talking about the novel whenever they had the chance. If anyone saw them now, they'd think they were old friends. Strange, considering their first meeting was a complete disaster. But Leah had forgiven everything and treated him kindly, like a real friend. Julian couldn't help but admire how clever and outspoken she was, though admittedly she could be a bit messy, which only made him smile more. Leah was extraordinary. While walking through town, he passed a dress shop and stopped in his tracks. In the window was a beautiful blue dress. Something about it reminded him of Leah. Elegant, striking, one of a kind. On his way back to the manor, Julian sat in the carriage, smiling to himself as he held the paper bag containing the dress. He couldn't wait to see her wear it. But by the time he arrived, rain was pouring down. In the parlour, he expected to find Leah, but she was nowhere in sight. Antoine soon entered, casually mentioning that he had just taken a walk with Leah and that she had slipped, so she went to change clothes. He was now waiting for her in the parlour. "Is she hurt?" Julian asked, worried. Antoine blinked, misunderstanding. "Oh, I'm fine. Just a little wet," he said smugly. Julian frowned. "I meant Leah." "Oh," Antoine shrugged. "She's fine. Don't worry so much. It was fun, though. Honestly, Leah's pretty easy to please. Just like any other girl." Julian's expression darkened. "What did you say?" "You know, that girl, Leah," Antoine replied with a smirk. "I bet she'll marry me. I mean, I don't get what's so special about her eyes anyway. Always acting all high and mighty. She talks too much too. I'm thinking of a way to make her." That's all Julian needed to hear. He threw a punch right into Antoine's face, silencing him mid-sentence. Antoine stumbled back, furious. "What the hell's your problem? Jealous because I'm the one she'll marry? She's just an easy girl." Smack. Another punch, harder this time. Before the fight could escalate further, Leah burst into the room. "Stop it!" she yelled. Without waiting, she slapped Julian across the face. "How could you? People get hurt when you hit them," she snapped. "Get out, Julian. I would never marry someone like you." Julian stood there, stunned and ashamed. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "Maybe it's better if I leave the island." He turned and walked out. Antoine was about to say something, but then he screamed out in pain again. Leah spun around in surprise and found her sisters, Jane and Lydia, the mischievous Riveron twins, hiding nearby. They had seen everything. "Antoine called you an easy girl," Jane said. "And Julian defended you," Lydia added. "Big time." Leah's heart sank. She had slapped the wrong person. Without thinking, Leah ran outside in the rain, desperate to catch up with Julian, but her shoes slipped and she fell hard on the wet ground. Julian, already a distance away, turned and rushed to her. "Here?" She looked up, soaked and muddy but determined. "I'm sorry," she blurted. "I didn't know what happened back there. I shouldn't have slapped you." Julian helped her up. "How did you even get involved?" she asked. "Because," Julian said simply, "you're my friend." Leah looked at him for a moment, then smiled through the rain. "Well then, as your friend, I forbid you from leaving." Back in her room later that day, Leah was reading when her maid entered with a package. "This looks like something of yours, miss." Leah opened it and found a note from Julian inside. Her heart skipped. Inside the box was the stunning blue dress she had seen in the shop window. She smiled, already planning to wear it to the ball 2 days later. The ball finally arrived. Julian, now recovered from his cold, stood tall and handsome in the hall, scanning the crowd. Then he saw her. Leah, in the blue dress, looked radiant. His breath caught. "You look beautiful," he said, walking up to her. Leah grinned. Why did you get me this dress anyway? Julian answered without hesitation. Because it suits you. No one else could pull it off like you. Why are you being so nice to me? She asked. You've listened to my stories, read my books, gave me gifts, punched Antoine, and even took a slap from me. But you still keep saying nice things. Julian looked her in the eyes, steady and sincere. Because I like you. Leah blinked. You like me? Julian nodded nervously. It's why I wanted to be friends. Did you get me the dress because you felt sorry for me? No, he replied. I got it because you looked like someone who needed something beautiful, and Edmund said that when a lady's feeling down, sometimes a gift can help. Then Leah threw a curveball. So, how do you apologize to a man? Julian smirked. A smile, and maybe a kiss. That's what your novels said. Without a second thought, Leah leaned in and kissed him on the lips. Julian froze, eyes wide, completely flustered. That's my way of saying sorry, she said with a mischievous smile. Still red-faced, Julian stammered, Well, would you like me to apologize too? Leah nodded teasingly. He leaned in slowly, brushing a hand against her cheek. Just as her sisters burst into the hall, sending them both stumbling apart. Leah turned away, face flushed. She wished they had a little more time, alone. The next day, Julian was nowhere to be found, not at breakfast, not at lunch, not even at tea. Leah was disappointed and confused. Did he change his mind? She wondered. Did I read it all wrong? Spotting Julian's servant nearby, she hurried over. Where is he? He caught a bad cold, the servant said. He's been resting since the ball. Apparently he was out in the rain for 2 days before it. Leah gasped. Her maid chimed in, remembering something strange. She'd seen a figure standing outside Leah's window during those rainy nights, watching her. It must have been Julian. Leah rushed to his room. When she burst in, Julian looked up from his bed and gave her a tired smile. Hey, he said softly. You're sick, she said, clearly worried. Julian's gaze shifted. What happened to your face? He asked, noticing a small scratch on her cheek. Leah blinked. I didn't even realize. Come in here. She sat by the bed as Julian gently wiped the scratch with a handkerchief. Then, without a word, he pressed a light kiss to her cheek. Leah stared, surprised. What was that for? Julian grinned faintly, my way of apologizing for not showing up yesterday. Leah helped him lie down again. Sorry for disturbing your rest. I'll leave you alone now. As she stood, Julian grabbed her hand. Don't go, you might get another scratch, he said, half joking, half serious. Let me walk you back. After a little while, Leah couldn't resist agreeing. She gently placed her hand on Julian's forehead, telling him it reminded her of a childhood memory. When she was very ill as a child, she once thought she heard someone come into her room and place a hand on her forehead until she fell asleep. She'd always believed it was her father, even though he was never the affectionate type. He hardly paid attention to his daughters and often raised his voice at their mother. Still, whenever she recalled that moment, she couldn't quite bring herself to hate him completely. Julian opened up then, revealing that his own father wasn't much different. He told Leah about a time they visited a count's estate. During the trip, his parents had a terrible fight. His mother left that very day, and his father stormed off in anger. Neither of them realized they had left Julian behind. It took 2 full weeks before a servant was sent to fetch him, only because someone finally noticed he was missing. His voice trembled slightly as he spoke, but he kept a small, bitter-sweet smile. Suddenly, Julian looked at Leah and said, Duke Riveron is a lucky man to have a daughter like you. He admitted she deserved much better suitors than the ones Her Majesty had sent. None of them were worthy. Still, he was thankful, because their failures led him to her, to that radiant smile that had somehow become his favourite thing in the world. Just as he was about to say more, his eyes fluttered closed and he drifted into sleep. The next evening, Julian returned to the dinner feast looking completely recovered. During the stormy night, someone had seen Antoine leaving the Riveron estate, and Count Roseman had quietly given up his pursuit of Leia once it became clear where her heart was leaning. Later, as they strolled hand in hand, Leia brought up the story Julian had shared about his father. She said that memories could be rewritten, that the past didn't have to define the future. She wanted to give him a new one. In this memory, his father might have been distant by day, but in the evenings he always made time for peaceful walks with his wife, just like they were doing now. And whenever she asked, he would pull her into a warm hug. Then, to demonstrate, Leia invited Julian to hug her like that. As he wrapped his arms around her, Julian wondered if she was trying to comfort him. Leia smiled and told him that from now on, if anyone asked, he should say his father was a kind man who loved him dearly. In that quiet moment, Julian realized Leia truly cared for him, from the depths of her heart. She reassured him that he was capable of love too. Julian smiled, warmth blooming in his chest. Without warning, he asked her to wait and dashed off. When he returned, he dropped to one knee, took her hand and kissed it. Holding out a ring, he proposed. Julian confessed he'd caught a fever from thinking about her non-stop and from worrying when he couldn't see her, even for a single moment. Meeting Leia had made him want to become better, and now he couldn't imagine life without her. He wanted her stories, her scoldings, her smiles every day. He asked her to marry him. Leia didn't hesitate. She smiled and said yes. But just as Julian let out a sigh of relief and joy, Leia added with a mischievous glint, "There's one thing I want to do before we get married." Julian, caught off guard but intrigued, asked, "What is it?" Still smiling, Leia leaned closer. "I want to sleep with you first." Julian froze. Leia explained that she wanted to be with the person she loved completely before marriage. Then, with a cheeky grin, she told him to come to her room around midnight. Julian was left completely speechless. Back in his room, Julian jumped into the shower, trying to calm down and collect his thoughts. It wasn't that he didn't want to. It was just that his nerves were off the charts. Eventually, he decided to take a walk, hoping fresh air would help. But somehow, his feet carried him straight to Leia's window. Not knowing if it was midnight yet, he hesitated. Then, gathering courage, he cracked the window open and softly called her name. To his complete shock, Leia popped up from the bathtub. Julian's face turned crimson in an instant. Leia, unaware at first that she was fully exposed, let out a loud scream and quickly dunked herself under water. Her cheeks flamed with embarrassment. "You're early," she scolded, hiding behind bubbles. "I haven't even finished soaking," Julian stammered, inching a little closer, voice gentle. He told her he was grateful for her courage earlier, and that this moment, though wildly unexpected, was one he would never forget. Then, leaning closer to the edge of the tub, his voice low and sincere, Julian whispered, "I love you." After that wild night, Julian and Leia took their sweet time enjoying each other's company. By late September, they threw a grand wedding celebration that had the whole kingdom buzzing. Soon after, their carriage rolled up to the Ranelagh estate. Leia, bursting with excitement about their new home, practically jumped out before it even stopped. But the moment she stepped inside, the excitement drained from her face. The place was dark, musty, and gloomier than she expected. Never one to back down from a challenge, Leia turned to Julian with her usual spark and declared, "This place needs a serious makeover." In less than 3 years, that lonely, cold manor transformed into something warm and full of life, beautiful and bright, just like the couple living in it. But while the house had changed, one small issue still cast a shadow on their love: their clashing personalities. One day, Julian heard that Leia had taken a tumble. Again. It wasn't the first time. Concern painted his face as he rushed to check on her, but his worry always came out sounding more like anger. Leah, hurt by his tone, couldn't help but feel discouraged. Julian and Leah were like polar opposites, different puzzle pieces trying to fit. Maybe the signs had been there since their very first clash. But back then they were so wildly in love they overlooked it all. Every time Leah got injured or into trouble, Julian's worry flared into frustration. He'd scold her, not out of cruelty, but out of fear. Still, what Leah longed for was just a little gentleness, just some softness in his words. Their maid, Judy, often found herself caught in the crossfire of their arguments, feeling sorry for Leah. One day, things boiled over. Julian barked orders at Leah as if she were one of his soldiers, and she couldn't hold it in anymore. "Could you not talk to me like that for once?" she snapped. Julian, instead of hearing her out, cut her off. Leah had tried to open up, to explain how his tone shook her. She wasn't asking for flowers or poetry, just some kindness. But Julian, trying to avoid another blowout, told her to drop it. That was the last straw. Furious and hurt, Leah stormed out of the room like a hurricane. Back in her room, she let the tears fall. Judy was there, quiet but supportive, listening as Leah poured her heart out. "I know he cares," Leah said between sobs, "but would it kill him to say it nicely? His coldness, it's getting to me. I miss him." Despite her pain, Leah decided to be the one to make the first move again. Judy watched with a heavy heart. It always seemed like Leah was the one extending the olive branch. Julian, for all his affection, rarely took the lead in mending things. Julian's reactions were unpredictable. When Leah came home limping or bruised, he'd either explode with rage or ice over with silence. Both stung, and that pain often sparked Leah's own temper, launching them into yet another argument. But Leah hated prolonged silence. She'd always break it within a day. Julian, on the other hand, needed space to cool down or risk saying something worse. Later that evening, Leah knocked gently on Julian's door, took a breath, and stepped in. "I'm tired of this," she said softly. "Let's just go back to how we were. I miss you." She reached out. "Can I at least get a hug, a kiss?" But Julian couldn't meet her eyes. He wanted to hold her, to say everything she needed to hear, but the words wouldn't come. He finally muttered, "I'm trying. I just need a little time, please." But time wasn't Leah's strong suit. If Julian stayed silent too long, she'd break down and apologize just to bring peace. Yet deep down she wished that, for once, he'd be the one to take that step. They had a routine. After a fight, Julian would quietly bring her milk with syrup. They'd cuddle up and move on. But like clockwork, another spat would follow in a week or two. Their love was passionate, but the friction was exhausting. Then came the day Leah decided their room needed a makeover. She told Julian, and he offered to send servants to help. "Just wait for them," he said. Of course, Leah didn't wait. Julian found her on the floor, cradling a bump on her head amid a sea of fallen books. She had tried clearing the shelves by herself. His worry turned to anger. "I told you to wait," he snapped, furious. Leah froze. His rage stunned her. Seeing her shaken, Julian realized he'd gone too far. But Leah didn't stay quiet. "Why do you always blow up like this?" she asked, voice trembling. Julian's emotions knotted inside him. He regretted the outburst, but the words still tangled in his throat. As Leah opened her mouth to apologize, "Again," he interrupted her. He didn't want her blaming herself, but all he could say was, "We'll talk later." Leah wasn't having it. "No," she said, stepping forward. "I want a hug. Now." Julian avoided her eyes. Not a word. Leah's heart cracked. She shoved him back, stormed out, and before she disappeared, she shouted through clenched teeth, "I hate you."